of the future. This is Flashpoint.
Happy Sunday, everybody. I'm Jason Colthorpe. Before we get rolling with this week's show, a quick note about last Monday night's debate among 4 of the candidates for Detroit mayor. In that hour, we covered a lot of ground on the issues that matter to Detroiters. James Craig, Sauntil Jenkins, Solomon Kinlock Jr., and Mary Sheffield mostly stayed away from attacking each other and focused on what their policies would be as mayor. And for that reason, we got answers on crime, affordable housing, neighborhood development, jobs, property taxes, business connections, and much more. If you missed it, I highly encourage you to check it out at clickondetroit.com and do that before you cast your primary vote. We celebrated Juneteenth this week, and it feels like a perfect time to revisit where organizations that value their diversity, equity, and inclusion programs are right now with that commitment. We're going to dive into that discussion with a panel of guests coming up. But first, you should recognize the name Tom Leonard. He unsuccessfully ran for Attorney General, and before that, he was the Republican Speaker of the House. Well, this week he announced he is running for governor. But how will he separate himself in a busy primary that already includes John James, Mike Cox, and Eric Nesbitt? Well, let's ask him right now on Flashpoint. And here he is. Let's say good morning to the former Speaker of the House, Tom Leonard. First of all, thanks for being here. When it comes to running for governor, give me the 30-second sales pitch. Why?
And thank you very much for having me. I mean, the bottom line, I'm running for 3 reasons. Hannah, Thomas, and Danny. That's my 8-year-old, my 5-year-old, and my soon-to-be 1-year-old. And Jason, when you look at the state of the state right now, the first 2 decades of this century, the only state that Michigan beat in population growth was West Virginia. Michigan has to become a growth state again. And the last thing I want is for my little girl to come to me 15 years from now, after she's graduated from college, and say, Dad, I've got to leave the state for better opportunity.
Yeah.
I don't want to get on a plane to go see my grandkids and my kids. That's why I'm doing this.
Which many people do. Well, let's dive into retaining talent in the state, attracting it, retraining it, and keeping it here in Michigan. How do you go about doing that?
So first, affordability. I mean, you look at the top 5 of the top 10 growth states across the country, they either have a substantially lower or no income tax at all. We need income tax reform in this state. But number 2, as I travel the state, I listen to people that they want lower property taxes. I mean, think of the burden that higher property taxes put on a young couple.
Yeah.
They just got married, no date nights, no vacation, but most importantly, they can't start a family. I'm talking to seniors that want to stay in their homes. We've got to do something with property taxes as well.
Can you do that without sacrificing essential services, though?
Oh, I believe we can. When you look at the state budget, I left in 2019, it was $59 billion. It's now $82 billion. Yes, we can do it.
That suggests, I feel like you're talking, and I've heard you mention you want to cut some waste at the state level. What sort of things, when you talk about making cuts there or eliminating waste, are you talking about programs? Are you talking about jobs? What does that mean?
Well, first and foremost, let's talk about government accountability. I mean, one of the things I want to do when I'm the next governor of this state is implement zero-based budgeting. What does that mean? That means instead of building off the budget from before, you go in, you start from zero, and you force the legislature to force the executive, hold them accountable, and force them to justify why every single line item is going to be in that budget. That's how you get through the fraud, waste, and abuse, is by starting over and going through every single line item and justifying it before it goes in.
Put yourself in the position of being governor right now. You have 4 of the leadership that are having a real tough time coming together on a budget issue. It's easy to say, I'll have the legislature do this or that. Right now, they can't do anything, and it appears they're going to miss a budget deadline for the first time in several years. How do you navigate a situation like that?
Well, and we did not miss those budget deadlines when I was Speaker. Now, what I would say is I've got a track record of working across the aisle to accomplish big ticket items. I mean, preliminary exam reform, that's the first process in the criminal justice process here in the state. When I was a freshman representative, the legislature tried for 20 years to get something done. They said it couldn't be done. We got it done almost unanimously. You look at teacher pension reform. 30 years they tried to do it. When I was Speaker, I made it a priority. We got it done. So I've got a history of working across the aisle to get big ticket items done. we will get it done, but it's going to take a positive vision when we do it.
This is what the state Democratic Party said about you when you announced your candidacy. Leonard is an extreme and out-of-touch politician who spent his career fighting against our public schools, voting against expanding health care coverage, and opposing reproductive rights and contraception access. Do you disagree with that statement or that assessment, or wear it as a badge of honor? Or?
That is completely false, and I would say this is the same speaker who eliminated driver responsibility fees for 350,000 people across this state, 75,000 here in the city of Detroit. I didn't hear them say that when Democrats were voting for that legislation and they wanted to get it done. I mean, listen, that's what's wrong with today's politics. I have been very clear with my team. We're going to adopt the Dan Campbell model. When Dan Campbell became coach of the Lions, he didn't look back at 2 or 3 decades of failure. He came in, he said, with grit, with determination, with hard work, and assembling the right team, we're going to work every day to get it done. If Dan Campbell turned around the Detroit Lions with that type of attitude and that type of plan, we can do it here in the state of Michigan with that type of leadership.
Well, whose kneecaps are you going to bite off?
Nobody. We're just going to go get the work.
Because I've heard you mention this, and every candidate that I've talked to about governor has talked about this. When you talk about education reform, obviously Michigan is lagging. It's been lagging for several years. How do you go about changing that, improving test scores, and what are the specifics there? Well,
I believe it all starts with 3rd grade reading. I mean, that is the foundation of our education system, and we are failing. Less than 40% of the children in this state can read at a proficient level, and only 11% here in Detroit public schools. So 3rd grade reading is the foundation. That is where we're going to start. And as a former prosecutor, I can tell you, if a kid can't read, if somebody has to drop out of school because they're illiterate, you've essentially created a pipeline to a welfare check or a prison cell. We cannot have that. It starts with 3rd grade reading, and I have a plan. We're going to get it done.
What's inside the plan? Accountability? Talk to me.
Yeah, so it's a rather large one, but the biggest one is targeted support. So the most effective, the most effective thing they have seen to help kids grow in reading is by making certain they have high-quality tutors in the classroom to assist these teachers. I mean, you look no further than the Mississippi Miracle. Mississippi is one of the poorest states in the country, but they put together the right policy, and they went from bottom 49 out of 50 in their reading scores to now top 10 in 10 years. So targeted support, but also we have to empower parents. Parents have to be involved in this process. There has to be communication with parents. And the only way it's going to get done is to have parental involvement. But again, 3rd grade reading, I believe, is the foundation of our education.
Let's talk roads real quick. The governor has a plan. We know the speaker has a plan. We have to wait and see where that comes together. What is your plan on roads, and would you be willing to compromise if that time came to put it into motion?
So first, I'd have to see what that compromise looks like. But first, I would say this. Michigan is one of the only states that collects nearly $1 billion per year at the pump that does not go into roads. And that's that sales tax. That needs to be rededicated to the roads. It's about $1 billion per year. But another issue is local zoning. I mean, we are spending almost $1 billion a year to move aggregate across the state or into the state. We need local zoning reform so that we can ensure that we're not blowing $1 billion per year that should be going to our roads. That's $2 billion right there. And then in 2023, our state legislature, they dedicated $4.3 billion to corporate welfare, picking winners and losers. Let's dedicate some of that money to roads and make it economic development for everybody.
Michigan's lost 27,000 manufacturing jobs over the last 6 years. Some people think manufacturing, it's just too difficult to get those back, and maybe there's a different road ahead for Michigan. When you look at a loss like that, do you think those manufacturing jobs can come back? And if not, do you want to replace them with higher tech jobs somewhere?
So we definitely need to diversify our economy, but we are a manufacturing state, and I believe we can continue to foster and grow that. I mean, Michigan ought to be the easiest place not just to create a job, but find a job. So occupational licensure reform, okay? If you take a former military person, just left the Army, or they were a Marine, and they're certified to be an electrician or a mechanic in North Carolina or Florida, why wouldn't we want to certify them here if they come here? Why would we run them through all of the hoops? Going back to education, how come seniors in high school, why do they got to take extra foreign language classes and classes they may never use? If they have a local community college to get them certified, let's let them use that local community college so that when they get out, they can go get a job. So we can definitely bring manufacturing back to this state.
45 seconds. How do you're a guy who's from mid-Michigan, and that's where your career has been, but you're familiar with the entire state, ran a statewide campaign. How do you connect with Southeast Michigan, Detroiters specifically?
Yeah, I believe, as I've traveled the state, even here in Southeast Michigan, and I listen to voters, they want somebody that has a passion to govern, but somebody that's going to have that positive vision every single day focused on solving problems with real solutions. That is what this campaign is going to be. Again, the Dan Campbell approach. We're going to get it done.
All right. Former Speaker of the House, Tom Leonard, we certainly wish you good luck. And
thank you, my friend.
Talk to you again in the future. More Flashpoint coming up right after this. Welcome back, everybody. We celebrated Juneteenth this week, marking the day in 1865 when the last group of enslaved people in Galveston, Texas, finally got word of the news of the Emancipation Proclamation, and that came 2 years later. Felt like a good time to discuss diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives that many companies implemented and now have started to roll back. And to do that with me this morning, let's welcome Kimberly Hoyle, Managing Partner at Lambert by LLYC. Camille Hibbler is the Superintendent at Ferndale Public Schools. Monica Woodson's the CEO of Girl Scouts of Southeastern Michigan, and Diallo Smith is the President and CEO of Life Remodeled. Everybody, thanks so much for being here this morning. Let me start here. What do we think the long-term risks are of walking away from DEI at this point?
Sure. I think there's a number of issues, right, and risks. I think that from a business perspective, especially if you are consumer facing, you do run the risk of losing a large part of your consumer base. You run the risk of impacting your bottom line in a way that you may not be able to recover from, and you may find yourself looking for additional or alternate ways to recover and recoup those financial losses.
It's much more than just trying to save on a job title, so
absolutely,
to speak, right?
absolutely, yeah.
Anyone else?
Go ahead. I was just going to say, from a school perspective, I believe that our schools reflect society, right? And we want them to be able to be equipped to handle any situation that they may come into. It's an obligation that we have as educators, right? So for us in Ferndale Schools, it's not just about an initiative. It's embedded into our fabric of who we are. It is not just a initiative. It is how we teach. It's ensuring that all of our students have access to what they need to have access to. And then as far as the curriculum, ensuring that there's windows, mirrors, and sliding doors, reflection of our students and the curriculum and the materials that they see every day. And that's just absolutely necessary to ensure that we're doing what we're supposed to be doing for our students.
Diallo?
Yeah, you know, if I think about it at the macro level, you think about the United States being the biggest super economic power of the world, right? But we're also the most diverse country in the world. And so those two parallels, or those two truths actually parallel one another. So from a business sector, it makes actual economic sense for us to embrace diversity. To make it on a micro level, when I think about the city of Detroit, you know, Detroit has the largest African-American population of any major city in the world. And so the more we don't allow for diversity, equity, and inclusion to be a significant part of what's happening here in Detroit, in our Detroit neighborhoods, we suffer as a city, but we also suffer as a state and then ultimately as a nation.
Yeah, and Monica, there are ways to reimagine this, right? I mean, no matter what happens in this moment.
There are, and at Girl Scouts, we're leaning into it, right? You can't, we are not shying away from diversity, equity, inclusion. And for us, it shows up, obviously we're here around Juneteenth, so we're talking black and brown, but it's also, it's geographical inclusion, it's abilities inclusion, it's all of these things that, to Diallo's point, make us who we are. How dare we shy away from that?
Yeah, I love that you brought up each word, because, and especially inclusion. I think it was Pete Buttigieg who was breaking it down. He goes, if you think of the opposite of these words, who's wanting that? And inclusion, it was the one that stood out, because the opposite is exclusion. And it's not about, they weaponize it and say that's a DEI hire. Well, when you talk about exclusion, it's not about someone who's not qualified. It's someone who never had a chance in the first place. Anybody
It's
want to
about leveling the field.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, and if you think about Juneteenth, which we just celebrated yesterday as a nation, that was exactly what the function of that proclamation was. How can we allow for a vast majority of people who helped to build the United States into an economic superpower be a part of that economic reality, right? And so since then to now, and not only African Americans, but all of the immigrant communities, certainly women have allowed for this country to become what it is. And that's something that we shouldn't shy away from. That's something that we should actually embrace and celebrate.
Yeah, women who lead, and I have three right here who can.
And then there's me.
And me. That's right.
We believe education is the great equalizer, right? Like that in itself is the way that we can ensure that we are being inclusive, is the way that we educate and ensuring that we are doing those things.
And then at the end of the day, it's great for not only business, but for humanity and for community as well, all the way around.
When organizations, when they do stay committed to it, I guess, is there legalities they have to jump through now? I don't know who to go to with this, but I wonder if you have any thoughts on when they, because there's retribution threats in certain cases, but how do you get around that?
You know, and I'll let everybody else jump in here, but you know, it's a stark reality that equity is a bad word.
Right.
One that you can get penalized from. And so I think, you know, as far as Life and Model goes, we look at ourselves as being leaders in the community. And so we're very clear about what our stance on diversity, equity, and inclusion is. But I also understand that there are other organizations, because of government funding or X, Y, and Z, that need to make hard decisions about how they want to reframe their identity in the DE&I space. So, you know, I know for us, that's how we've approached it.
Yes.
So for us, you know, I'm going to behave today. For us, we are, as I said, we are certainly not shying away from it. We are very fortunate to not have government funding. We have funding from other sources. But the reality is, we teach girls and Girl Scouts to be courageous, confident, and have character. How dare we not lead in that same way? We simply cannot lead from a place of fear. And so we are going to continue doing the work that we're doing and help to raise a new generation of women and of girls and women who are like, yeah, no, this is not okay. We are going to lean into this work and we are going to be committed to this work. And again, I say this as a leader of an organization who is not fighting for federal funding.
Right.
So, and I'm very grateful for that. But I think we all have to have a level of fearlessness to take on these roles to begin with.
Yeah, the translation was bring it on, I think is what you were shooting for there.
K-12 school, we absolutely have funding from both state and federal.
Quite the opposite.
And it has been challenging, would be a nice way to put it, from having to certify our commitment to not utilizing DEI initiatives, and from potentially not receiving the funding for the students that we know need it the most.
And you have a partner right now on the state level, but that could change next year.
Absolutely. So I think that, you know, it's been scary, but as was mentioned by my colleagues, leaning in is absolutely what's required. Everyone is watching how we handle these situations, and it doesn't fall short on me to know that all of the students are watching how I'm handling this, and Ferndale schools will stand firm.
And I'll say for us, you know, we work with clients who are, some of them have to look at their public companies and private companies, right? So they have to look at their, the support ecosystem. If they're public companies, what is their shareholder sentiment? So they're asking, how do we look at our messaging, and do we scrub that messaging and scrub language from the messaging and not necessarily rewrite the narrative, but sort of reframe it a bit. So we have been asked by clients to help them reframe the narrative, and not that they're stepping away from the policies or from the support, but taking themselves out of the direct line of fire to make sure that they're not directly impacted by shareholder support and such. So,
and Kim, I think it's really important that we talk about the human emotional dynamic.
Absolutely.
Some of the persons who are responsible for doing that scraping and scrubbing, who I know, are people of color. And when they're going through scrubbing that data, there's a sense of, wow, I am erasing our history. I'm erasing people who have done great things to advance culture and advance our society, but now I have to re-articulate what they've done and what they've accomplished. You know, I'm a Gen Xer, right? So I have my parents who are boomers, and I have my children who are Gen Zers, and both of them asked two questions. My parents asked, well, did anything that we did matter? What we fought for, what we advocated for, did that matter? And my son and my daughter are asking, do I matter? And so I think that when we think about just the human dynamic and what it means for just real people every day, I mean, we could talk about the corporate realities, and certainly we have to, but it really trickles down to how people are impacted on a personal level.
Well, I have to leave it there, but I would think that everybody here is hopeful about the next generation carrying both Juneteenth and DEI ideologies on the next generation forward. So great discussion. We can have a lot of different times, I would think, throughout the year. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you.
We'll wrap up this edition of Flashpoint right after this. Four things before we get out of here this morning. With the Ford fireworks coming up tomorrow night right here on Local 4, how about 4 fun facts about fireworks? First, you can thank China and Italy for tomorrow night's big show. Chinese chemists discovered them by accident, and then, well, they used them to ward off evil spirits. But it was Italian pyrotechnicians who invented the aerial shell 200 years ago to launch it up in the sky before they explode. They also added those chemicals to produce the colors. Speaking of which, second, the colors are created by different chemical combinations. But did you know blue? Well, it's the hardest to create. Third, those shapes, well, they're often associated with flowers. Yeah, you're looking at a couple of them right there. A perfect circle of stars is known as a chrysanthemum, and the stars that ascend and then descend, well, they're called peonies. And fourth and finally, when you and the kids light off some bottle rockets on July 4th, just know that'll be the 248th straight year that Americans have celebrated their independence with fireworks. The first time was in 1777. If you're headed out to watch on either side of the river tomorrow night, well, enjoy the show, which you know is one of the best in all of the land. And if you can't make it, remember you can watch it live right here on Local 4, and we have a special announcement mixed in as well. That's our show this week. Don't forget, share your thoughts on the show Flashpoint at clickondetroit.com. That's the way to get me. I'm Jason Colthorpe. We'll see you later.